Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gabester here. This is the Mythic DPS guide for Kargath Bladefist. And this encounter on Mythic is not too significantly difficult compared to the heroic version. Both are fairly simple for their difficulty level. This Mythic version adds a few new mechanics, however, namely in the form of the Roar of the Crowd favor buff, which adds potentially extra bonus damage to the raid for doing tasks that the spectators rather enjoy and love to watch. And likewise, you can lose this bonus if you screw things up. You'll also get active tigers that have no longer confined themselves to their pits and will chase the raid around. So with that, let's get started. So as I mentioned, Roar of the Crowd is a beneficial buff, potentially, that will display itself as an alternate power bar. You can see a picture of what the default version looks like since I don't have it in my UI. And as this increases, the raid will gain segments of 25 extra damage dealt for every 25 energy level. So 0% until you reach 25 energy, and then you'll gain 25% bonus, and then 50, then 75, and finally 100 if you max it out. So there are three basic ways to increase this meter. First is the longer you kite Berserker Rush, the more of the energy you'll gain, more favor you'll gain. If you move a tiger that is chasing someone into an existing flame pillar, that ring will cause the tiger to be ignited or inflamed for 10 seconds, and this will give you a small boost of favor. And lastly, if you are up above dealing with the spectators, every time you kill one of the little tiny iron grunts, it will also give you a small boost. So those are the basic ways to gain favor, and losing favor is essentially anything bad. Dying to Berserker Rush, dying to Tigers, any of that stuff. So if you help the raid out by performing these tasks well, you'll gain a huge damage bonus after a short period of time and be able to really blow your cooldowns, your DPS cooldowns, Bloodlust, all that good stuff, once the energy level reaches a good number. We kind of decided around 75 plus was a good goal, since you can hit 100, and we did eventually, but it's not reliable, especially in your first time going through. So generally you're going to want to extend Berserker Rush, at least the first few casts, by kiting the boss for as much of the total 20-second duration as possible. And this can be done in a combination of just pure movement boost kiting methods, as well as sort of cooldown methods, where you can mitigate the damage. So here you see a little top-down view of the arena. We chose the back side of the room. This is where you exit after the boss is defeated because of the wide open space there. So we have two markers at A and B, and these are just between the lines of the circles of the fire pillars that they'll create there. So when someone gets targeted initially by Berserker Rush and we're kiting, that person runs to A or B. And once the boss gets close, they run along the wall to the closest marker of P, which is a Warlock portal position. So the Warlock portals are linked from the left marker P and the right one. So obviously a player will just use the portal that's nearest to them once the boss gets close and port to the opposite one. And then from there, they run along that wall behind the other tiger cage to the opposite marker A or B, whichever is opposite they started on. That's the basic kite method that we used, and it seems to be the best because it maximizes the distance that you can force the boss to run, while guaranteeing that you do not have to let him run past a fire pillar that may be active or may have spawned during the kite phase. Now, depending whether your raid has warlocks or other particular cooldowns, you may or may not use the same strategy, but assuming you do have roughly the same setup, the next thing to do is once the player gets about 10 seconds through the Berserker Rush, they'll be back at the opposite position, and then a paladin can use Hand of Protection on that player. It lasts 10 seconds, so as long as they cast it with just under 10 seconds remaining on the Berserker Rush, the kiting player can just stand stationary. So you'll stand at the opposite marker from where you started, going from A to B or B to A, and with Hand of Protection on you, you can just stay there for the rest of the duration until he's done. If you do the full 20 seconds in that way, it will add a lot of favor and extra damage overall. And because this can target any ranged DPS, it's important that all ranged DPS players know kind of how this is going to happen. Again, assuming your raid uses a similar method. It's worth noting also that you can use other damage mitigation or immunity abilities on your own without getting a hand of protection. So if you're a mage, you can ice block, you can deterrence. If you're a hunter, you can even use damage reduction cooldowns, like dispersion if you're a shadow priest, all that good stuff. You just have to be certain that you time it properly, because Berserker Rush, particularly at the end of the duration, will do an insane amount of damage, like 400,000 or 500,000 in a single hit. So you really have to be able to mitigate that amount or just be straight up immune to it. The other new thing as mentioned is that the tigers will one at a time come out of their cage and aggro a random raid member. Again, it will target ranged players. So if you get targeted by a tiger, you're going to want to run it through an existing fire pillar field. When the tiger touches that field, it will become inflamed for 10 seconds, which disorients it. It won't do anything during that time. And it will also take 50% extra damage during the 10-second period. In addition to that, it will fixate on a new random target. So if you're kiting a tiger, once it touches fire, you should lose the fixate debuff, which is called On the Hunt, and it will select someone else. That said, if a tiger's on somebody else, you want to try to position yourself away from it so that if it does refixate you, you can easily kite it through an existing pillar. Also, be wary that if a tiger is in a particular fire pillar at the time and you try to kite it into that same fire pillar, you're going to have to delay it a bit, run it out a few yards so it's not in the fire at all before you go back in. We found some issues if you just tried to simply keep it in the fire the full time. It wouldn't actually disorient it, essentially. There seems to be a cooldown of some kind that's hidden or whatnot. So you don't be afraid to kite it. The tigers themselves are actually quite slow, so even the most moderate movement boost ability on yourself will allow you to outrun its speed, and you can go around the outside and stuff until you can put it back into another fire pillar. As for specifically targeting and killing the tigers, this will be up to your raid strategy, of course. We found it actually worked best to have ranged DPS kill them. Melee shouldn't really bother because they're often in fire. You can't really attack them. But if your raid elects to do so, simply focusing your DPS on the tiger while it has that 10-second debuff where it takes 50% more damage is a great time to do it. It only has 8 million health, so it can die fairly quickly if you used your small burst cooldowns during that period. The final new mechanic for Mythic is when the flame pillars are active, they will shoot out gouts of fire at random raid members every 5 seconds. These do moderate damage every hit, but more importantly, they're so frequent, in addition to the other extraneous damage that you might take, they can be quite deadly if you don't avoid them. So the best thing you can do to help your raid out in this entire encounter is to watch your feet constantly. And if you see fire shooting out, just do your best to sidestep it or dodge it. You have to do it very frequently, particularly if you get multiple fire pillars active. But generally speaking, the raid will try to keep the number of fire pillars down to 1 or 2 at most, so you don't have to dodge that much. But still, do your best to dodge this constantly, and don't be afraid to use a personal cooldown that can mitigate some of the damage if you get low. Because otherwise, this actual entire fight is all avoidable damage. So there shouldn't be anything that threatens you if you avoid the things that you can't avoid. So don't be afraid to use your personals if something bad goes wrong. Finally, we'll briefly discuss the Spectator Team. Luckily or unluckily, depending on your review, this is not really that different than the heroic version on Mythic. If you are one of the DPS that is using the chain hurl to be thrown up top and deal with the spectators, most of it is the same mechanically. You may get snared quite a bit, get slowed. So if you have any movement boost abilities, that will help. But otherwise, the basic goal is the same. You want to gather up as many of those mobs as you can as quickly as possible, and then use all your heavy area of effect burst damage to cleave them down. If you kill an Iron Grunt up top, you do gain a small amount of favor from the roar of the crowd thing. So killing all the ads is important on Mythic compared to on Heroic, where the Iron Grunts don't matter. You just want the name guys. So otherwise, like I said, do your best to gather them all up quickly. Use movement boosts on yourself, or at least your tank, so that he or she can gather things fast, and then use all your AE damage to get them down. And that's about it. If you can handle the Tigers, the Berserker Rush kiting, if you're doing that method, then everything should fall into place after just a few attempts. That is the Mythic Kargath Bladefist DPS guide. As always, good luck, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.